With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
And so it is episode 22. We are all fully recovered from auto shows for the moment, and we are heading into lovely spring. We get like actual leaves on trees right now. It's great.
Yeah, it's beautiful here in Michigan.
Yeah, I'm sure it's getting to like sportsman season. You're gonna go take the boat to the lake and I don't know, make excuses to go fishing, which is really excuses to just do nothing.
Well, I don't fish and I don't have a boat, but we have a couple of paddle boards that we'll take out to the lake.
See, but you could do nothing. And you could say, like, I don't fish.
Well, you see, what I do is I paddle out to the middle of the lake and then I lay back and I just relax for a half an hour.
Yeah, I don't know what that relax. I'm not sure what that means. But we are clearly at different points in our lives. So.
Absolutely. My kids are out of the house.
Oh, mine are here. Oh, yeah, they sure are. That's a whole different
moving
podcast.
Right along.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about what we're driving. I'm actually really, really interested in the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid, which is what you've got this week.
Yeah, I got the Pacifica Hybrid a couple of days ago. And for those not familiar, the Pacifica, which I think we talked about in one of our earlier shows back in around November timeframe, the regular Pacifica is the latest version of Chrysler's minivan. And the Pacifica is, at least right now, is I think the best minivan on the road, the best minivan available. Now,
I'll agree with that.
A few weeks from now, when they start shipping the new Honda Odysseys, we may have to reevaluate that. But for the moment, at least, the Pacifica is still the best minivan you can get. I mean, it's great looking, arguably better looking, than the new Odyssey. Has a really nicely executed interior, a lot of cool features. And one thing that the Pacifica offers now that no other minivan, including the Odyssey, has is a plug-in hybrid version. And notice that, they don't call it a plug-in hybrid. It's only badged as the Pacifica Hybrid. And there were some questions. I posted some stuff on Facebook the other day. And there was questions from one commenter about whether the Pacifica Hybrid has an EV mode button, or a hold switch like a lot of plug-in hybrids do that let you save the battery power. So if you're going somewhere on the highway and you want to save the battery power for when you're back in town, can you do that? And the answer to that is no. You can't do that. What it seems that what Chrysler is doing with their marketing strategy with this thing is they're really pushing it as trying to keep it really simple. They're not targeting this obviously at the hardcore green enthusiasts because they're probably not going to want a vehicle as big as this anyway. I mean, this is really a vehicle that's designed to be the best of what minivans have always been, which is great people movers, great for moving a family around, 7 people in comfort with lots of room for your gear and everything else. And, a lot of flexibility, dropping the seats down, having lots of cargo space when you need it, easy to get in and out of through the sliding side doors, just no hassle, just great for moving families. And, for whatever reason, American families seem to have migrated away from minivans to sport utility vehicles and crossovers, which, frankly, I think are just less useful, especially if you've got young kids. But but the minivan is still the best family vehicle, big family vehicle. And what this one does is it extends that, just makes it much more fuel efficient. In every other way, it's just like driving any other Pacifica, but it's just a lot more energy efficient. And so there's no different modes to select and no regen on demand or any of that kind of thing. You just get in and drive it. And when you come home at night, you plug it in, charge up the battery, unplug it when you leave in the morning, and you can get about 35 miles of 35 to 40 miles of all electric range. So for most people, most of the time, if you plug it in at night, you're probably going to use almost no gas in this thing, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me that the holy grail of hybrid vehicles has been like, why does nobody make a minivan or a pickup truck? Now, the pickup truck seems like it might be a little harder to make that leap. But yeah, I mean, a Pacifica that doesn't use fuel sounds like that's just a money machine. It just pays you back.
Well, absolutely. Minivans are big and they're fairly heavy. So they're not, they're not the most fuel efficient vehicles around. But, if you look at it from the perspective of what you can do with it, if you're actually, hauling, if you've got 4 or 5 kids, as, some families do, and you're hauling, doing carpool duty, hauling your neighbor's kids, to school, things like that, or, to soccer practice, the classic, example. If you look at it as like people miles per gallon, it actually makes a lot of sense. With the plug-in hybrid, it just takes it to a whole new level. And it's really amazing, what this thing can do. I took it, I have a regular test loop that I use when I'm testing plug-in vehicles, to look at their efficiency. And it's about a 16-mile sort of urban, semi-urban loop around this area. And, I started off with the vehicle fully charged up. I did 1 lap with it in drive and a second lap with it in low mode, where you do get extra regenerative braking. And that's really about the only option you have as far as tweaking the performance of the thing. And when I came back after 32 miles, it still had 20% left on the battery. So, you can, for most people, you'll be able to do most of your daily driving without ever using any gas, as long as you plug it in at night. And that's all you have to do is just plug it in, and with the size of battery you have in a typical plug-in hybrid, in this case, it's 16 kilowatt hours. You can, even without a level 2 charger, a 240 volt charger, you can still charge it up. You can still top it up overnight.
Is that a big battery for a plug-in hybrid?
Yeah, it's bigger than most of the plug-in hybrids. It's the same size as the Gen 1 Volt was when it launched. So the first generation Chevy Volt also had a 16 kilowatt hour battery. And, this one has a little bit less range than the Volt did, but, it also weighs, about 1,400 pounds more. I mean, it's like
2 volts.
Yeah. I mean, this is a 5,000 pound vehicle, but it also carries 7 people and a whole bunch of cargo, so it has a lot more utility than a Volt does.
So there is simplicity the only reason really behind not having the ability to sort of switch the battery in or out and conserve the power? And it's just basically like, this is a car for you to get in and go, and it saves fuel either by running the battery down first and then acting as a traditional hybrid, or just whatever. It's like you don't have to think about it, you just use it.
Yeah, I think that's basically what it comes down to, is just trying to keep it simple, not confuse the issue, because the people that are typically going to buy a minivan are not concerned about all that stuff most of the time. They just want, something that's going to be practical and suit their purposes, meet their functional needs. And this vehicle does that.
Yeah, I don't think we can argue with that. I mean, especially if there's not a whole bunch of buttons to learn how to press and stuff like that, and just fiddle with it. Just again, I hit the button and I just go. And overall, the rest of the vehicle is It's a Pacifica Limited that it's based on, or is it?
Yeah, the hybrid. I think it's like similar to the touring. The touring trim, or maybe the limited. I haven't looked at exactly what features are on there. So the less expensive hybrid is the premium, which is probably similar equipment to the touring or the Touring L Plus. And then there's also a hybrid platinum. So the premium starts at 42,000 and the platinum is 45. So it's an extra $3,000, but, you also, because it's got a 16 kilowatt hour battery, it's eligible for the full maximum $7,500 federal tax credit for plug-in vehicles. And then, if you live in California, there's also up to a $5,000 credit that's available there. And there's different credits in different states. So at the very least, you're going to be able to get one of these for about 35, a little less than 35,000 for the base, for the hybrid premium model.
That's almost a better deal than the non-hybrid. I think it actually is a better deal than the non-hybrid.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like the Touring L, is 35,000. So, this would be a little bit less than a Touring L with the tax credit. And, the limited is 43,000 and there's no tax credits on that. So, and this one is really nicely equipped. It's got the rear seat entertainment system with the dual screens, and you can play games on there as well as watch movies. There's a DVD or a Blu-ray player built in. So it's got all of the features that you would expect on a vehicle like this, and there's also a Wi-Fi hotspot built into the van.
Yeah, I think even when the Odyssey does arrive, the Pacific is really going to have a place and some staying power in the market, just because it's partially because it's not the Odyssey and it's not the Sienna, right? It's got its own particular flavor and it's just very well executed. The Odyssey may feel a little sportier to drive, but I was really very impressed with the Pacifica, and it needed to be as good as it is. So I'm pleased to see that they've finally introduced a hybrid minivan and a very good, platform overall for this generation of a minivan. I'm not sold on the name change. I'm kind of sad that Stow and Go goes away with the hybrid, but understand.
Yeah, I mean that is one thing you do lose on the hybrid. You still have Stow and Go for the third row seats. They flip back into the well in the back. But for the second row seats, you have to sacrifice those storage bins for the seats to the battery pack. That's where the lithium ion battery goes, is where the Stow and Go would normally be. So if you want to get rid of the second row seats, you actually have to go the old school way and actually lift them out and leave them in the garage.
Which is funny to understand, because if you look at the latest advertising for the Pacifica, they make it a point to play up Stow and Go and take shots at vans that don't have that feature.
Yeah.
So like, well, what are you going to do when you start to try to sell the whatever?
Yeah. But the hybrid powertrain in this thing, they've combined an Atkinson cycle version of the 3.6 liter Pentastar, and they're a new hybrid transmission that Chrysler designed in-house. And interestingly, they designed it to fit within the exact same packaging envelope as the current 9-speed transmission, the ZF Design 9-speed that they use on most of their front-wheel drive applications right now. So that means this thing could easily fit into, say a Jeep Cherokee or, the Compass, or, most of the current Jeep family, certainly the higher volume ones.
Well, and that was, I guess, one of my other questions is, where did the hybrid powertrain come from? It sounds like Chrysler designed it in-house.
And the 2-motor hybrid, and it's built in their Kokomo, Indiana transmission plant.
Because we haven't seen a hybrid from Chrysler for quite a long time. They had the Aspen.
Yeah, the only hybrid they've done before was the Dodge, the Chrysler Aspen and Dodge Durango. which was briefly sold in 2008, right before everything went to hell. And that was using the GM two-mode hybrid system. So they had the same transmission. In fact, GM supplied the transmissions. They manufactured the transmissions that Chrysler used. And you mentioned earlier, why no one else has done a hybrid pickup trucks. And actually, GM did do hybrid pickup trucks and full-size SUVs. They sold them for several years.
They did. I didn't realize they did a pickup. I knew they did the SUVs, obviously, but I didn't.
They didn't sell very many of them because they were very expensive.
Well, and also not all that efficient.
Well, actually, if when you compared them directly to the gas versions that they had at the time, they were in fact about 25 to 30% more efficient.
That's quite a significant gain.
Well, and especially, the reason why they launched the hybrid system on the full size trucks was, they were actually being logical about it, which of course, actual consumers rarely are. But, they figured, if you're going to put a hybrid system on there, why not do it on the vehicle where you actually have the most to gain in terms of total fuel consumption savings as opposed to just MPG. So, those trucks were rated at 22 miles per gallon, city and highway, which, for the time, most of the comparable pickup trucks, 2008, they were running 14, 15, maybe 16 miles per gallon tops. And, when you're talking about going from 15 miles per gallon to 20 miles per gallon, that 5 mile per gallon difference in terms of how many gallons of fuel you save every year is actually a lot bigger than if you go from 35 to 40. When you go 35 to 40, you don't actually save very much fuel.
Right, you save like a fraction of a gallon.
Right.
Or I'm not good at the math. I'll just throw that out there.
I did a whole article back on Autoblog Green back in the day that does all that math, and we'll link that in the post for this. It's still, that article's still live, but you actually have a lot more to gain in terms of fuel savings when you're starting from a vehicle that's low mileage than incremental improvements on small cars. You don't actually have much savings. It's all on the low end is where you get the big savings. So somebody buying a Pacifica that would normally get maybe 20, 22 miles per gallon and going to 50, 60, 70 miles per gallon, with a plug-in hybrid or miles per gallon equivalent, that's actually some really huge savings, and your payback on a vehicle like this is going to be pretty significant. And whatever premium you'll pay on, to get the hybrid system or a plug-in hybrid, you'll more than make that back, in fuel savings every year. As long, even if you don't plug it in, if you just drive it as a hybrid and you never plug it in, which would be a waste, you'll probably still, get your money back within a year or two. I'll still have to go through and do the math on that. But, there's more, hybrid pickups and larger vehicles coming in the next few years. Ford announced back in January that they're doing a hybrid F-150 in 2020, as well as a hybrid Mustang. And there's going to be others coming soon as well. Yeah,
hybrids sort of cooled down a little bit as we have shifted focus to autonomy, and to a certain degree, like that's sort of the hybrid of the last couple of years, because everybody wanted to introduce a hybrid not too long ago, and it seems like everybody got distracted recently by all of these self-driving cars and flying cars. Now apparently there's
don't even get me started on flying cars.
Did you see that thing, that the Larry Page thing, the Kitty Hawk thing?
Yes.
I was like, they must be hitting it so hard for PR, because that is not a flying car. That is a like glorified drone, and to me it looks like it uses ground effect to remain airborne, like the old Tupolev kind of thing. And like it's certainly a thing. It does work. But it's a gadget for really, wealthy people to go across their lakes at, their private, like very expensive.
If they don't want to raise a wake on their lake, they can. They can fly over it on that thing.
I don't know. I don't want to spend a whole podcast on it. It's just BS, and I will say flying cars will not be a thing ever.
You're right. The whole Uber announcement, their flying car program. I mean, all that was, that was just a distraction. It's like, bright shiny object over here, bright shiny object. Ignore all the scandals we've got going on back at the home office. Bright shiny object, flying cars.
I even managed to post a thing about Uber today, which I'd been sort of cooking for a month. I was very proud of myself.
Yeah, good stuff.
All right, so
what have you been driving, Dan?
Yeah, I wanted to just touch on the RX 450 after I spent a full week with it, because I think the last time I had just gotten into it. And I thought, and I still think, that it looks more distinctive than before. The styling is more daring, but there's too much of it. It's overstyled. And I don't really know how I feel about it beyond that. It's like, it's just not that kind of car. It's kind of meant to fade into your lizard brain. It does everything, so you don't really have to think about it. So I think that all that anodyne perfection just made it frustrating for me as a person who wants a little excitement or a little personality, at the very least, out of my cars. The thing that got the biggest reaction from me was their infotainment system, which is terrible. It's so slow. You just wait for the function to come up on the screen, and I don't know what it's based on. I don't actually know how old it is. It feels old, and being slow, I think, is actually, it's like, that's a safety thing to me now.
It is an older system. It was actually developed in cooperation with Nuance, one of your hometown companies.
Yeah. Everybody in town has done work for Nuance at one point or another.
Yeah. So it's the original Entune and the Lexus Enform, I think, is the branding that they use on the Lexus vehicles. They're all developed with Nuance, and starting this fall, or actually starting this spring with the launch of the new Camry, they're starting to transition over to a next generation Entune system, which is all new, much more powerful, and hopefully should be a lot better.
Yeah, and I understand that it's tough when you roll these things out and they have to have a life of, 4 to 5 years maybe of, being able to handle upgrades and new features and, drive larger screens and all of those things. And so when they get to the end of the life, they're going to feel really behind the times as the competition has updated what their systems do as well. So it does put automakers in a tough spot, and they can't be redeveloping these things every year.
And, that's one of the keys behind, the appeal of smartphone projection systems. If you can have your phone, apps from your phone just be projected up onto the screen, so that you're not relying on, what's built into the vehicle for, 5, 10, 12 years. And, you can use whatever the latest thing is from your phone, then hopefully that should be, that should work better than whatever is built in. Yeah. And to a large degree, I think it does, but we'll come back to that later when we answer one of the listener questions.
Well, and you can blame the phone manufacturer for any performance problems.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I don't want to be the car guy dinging the Lexus for being a Lexus. There's a lot of subtle, really hard work making the RX 450 sort of as perfected as it is. And I at least they're trying to put a little bit more oomph into it. It's still not my kind of car. It's comfortable enough, I guess. But what they replaced it with...
First, hold on. Before you go on to what came next.
Yeah.
Was yours an F Sport?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just the RX 450H. So, and the throttle is very mushy in the regular mode, which annoyed the crap out of me. So I wound up in sport all the time, just so that it would be somewhat responsive. And it's not like I want it to peel out. I just I'm the kind of person, I don't like automatic modes and stuff. And just I want the machine to do what I ask the machine to do when I ask it to do it. When I first got my first cars with electronic throttles, they drove me nuts for a couple of weeks because I could feel the lag between my foot, my input and the actual system responding. It drove me bonkers. I eventually got used to it, so they won, but
I have one more question for you before
Sure.
we continue on. And I'm trying to remember if the new RX, does it have the touchpad or does it have like the little stubby joystick?
No touchpad, just stubby joystick. I have used the touchpad in...
The RC has it and the NX has it.
I think I used it in the NX, but I'm not sure. Which I've played with it. It's the touchpad stuff. Like, it intrigues me. It's better in some ways. Like, I really liked it in the Audi, the last Audi I had, which I think was an A4. I found it really actually convenient, and it's funny, like, because it's actually not as convenient for some people as I found it. It's just, because I think you thought it was easier to use a different way to input stuff to it. So it's just having multiple input methods and what just like the most immediate way for that person to interact with the machine. So I think we're going to see more of that across all automakers. Is there's not going to be just one way to get information into the system or make a request, and we're seeing it too. Like, we've got systems with, like, in BMWs, they have the touchscreen and the iDrive controller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're multimodal systems.
Yeah. No, there's actually a word for it. There we go.
Yes. There's an actual term of art.
Excellent.
All right. So what did you trade in the RX for?
All the gas I saved has been completely burned because they dropped off a Charger SRT Hellcat.
Oh, so you got the opposite of the Pacifica Hybrid.
Yes. Holy crap. This car is an animal, which is, it's aptly named. But I don't really want to talk too much about the 700 horsepower engine. Yes, it's very powerful. It has supercharger whine. It's what else you could just say? It's a 700 horsepower engine. It's brilliant. And it sounds fantastic. What I think gets missed in a lot of discussions about the Hellcat cars is they have really upgraded the chassis. They've tuned it very well. I would take this car without the engine. You could put the base V6 in it. I don't care. Put the Tiger Shock 4-cylinder in it. If it rode and handled like this, if every Charger rode and handled like this and had the transmission tuned the way the automatic is, I would love the hell out of that car. They've done a very good job taking an old car and making it cope with the most powerful production engine I think has ever been put in a car.
The most powerful production engine in an American car.
Right.
And actually now it's only the second most powerful.
Right. Because
you got the Demon now.
Yeah. So what's your take on it, by the way? Automotive News thinks it should not be on the road. I think that's a little specious.
Well, the reality is, most of them won't be on the road anyway. Most of them are going to be garage queens. They're only building 3,000 of them for the U.S. market, and another 300 for Canada. And most of them are going to end up as either garage queens or the owners will install the requisite safety gear, roll cages and fire equipment and so on, and use them at the drag strip.
Yeah.
Which that was one of the interesting things when they launched the Demon. Shortly afterwards, reports came out that NHRA had banned it from their sanctioned drag strips, and that was only sort of partially true. What the ruling was. The way the NHRA rules are, any car that's capable of sub 10-second quarter mile times has to have a certain level of safety gear built into it. And the Demon does not come with all that safety gear from the factory. It's all readily available, but it doesn't come installed from the factory. And so if you want to run a Demon at an NHRA sanctioned drag strip, you will have to put in that equipment, and you also have to have a certain minimal level of competition license as well.
And that is Chrysler being smart and not equipping it with all of that safety gear and taking on all the liability.
The other alternative would have been to build something like the Mustang Cobra jets, and in fact Chrysler does offer a competition, a factory drag race version of the Challenger anyway that you can buy through Mopar. So what they wanted was effectively a barely street legal version of a competition drag car. And like I said, the vast majority of them, these things are going to be very expensive, and most of them are probably never even going to get driven on public roads. They'll some will get used in competition. The rest will be garage queens, or they might get pulled out once or twice a year for something like the Woodward Dream Cruise. We're
definitely going to hear when the first one gets wrapped into something.
Yeah.
It's that bugs me. Like, if we're going to be automotive journalists, if we're going to pretend to be journalists, maybe we should not be doing.
That
version of film.
Yeah, that's not journalism. That's if it bleeds, it leads. That's 11 o'clock local news.
Yeah. But now, have you had a chance to drive the Hellcat?
The only opportunity I ever had to drive a Hellcat was actually at the Chrysler Proving Grounds a couple years ago during their What's New event that they hold every year. I have not yet had a chance to get into a Hellcat for a week-long review.
What did you think of it when you drove it? I know it's a sort of very controlled environment there, but
I love the sound of that engine.
Oh yeah,
and you're right though about the handling. I mean, when you look back at American muscle cars, of the classic era, the late 1960s, these things were not nearly as powerful as what you can buy today. They were not as efficient. They did not run reliably if it was too hot or too cold. Because they had big honking carburetors on them, and they couldn't turn. They couldn't change direction. If you tried, they could barely stop at the end of a drag strip. So, that they're able to make something that powerful and that refined. And able to, go around the handling course at the Chelsea Proving Grounds, as well as that thing did, is really pretty amazing.
I think that gets lost in all the superlatives about the engine, which deserves every bit that it gets. But yeah, they started with the great engine. They added a supercharger to it. It's pretty great. The rest of the car though, it's a total package, and they took an old piece of hardware. These are old cars. It's a 10+ year old platform.
It's at this point it's closer to 20 years old.
Yeah. It was old when they got it.
On a couple generation back Mercedes E-Class platform.
Boy, does it feel good. And you would expect an engine this powerful would show up all of the deficiencies. It would just twist it up as if I haven't really looked around to see what's been sort of beefed up and extra gusseting and all of that, but it feels really good from behind the wheel. And Z-rated tires are some of my favorite things on earth because of the way they just telegraph what's going on. How much grip you have, and that's really important with a car like this because I have not shut off the traction control because it's been raining since I got the car. Today was the first afternoon that it was clear, and one of the things you do with a car like this when you need to familiarize yourself with it is you don't be stupid. You have that much power underfoot. We've all seen the videos of Mustangs leaving cars and coffee. I mean, this is the same kind of thing. It's a very powerful rear wheel drive car. Even if you have driving experience, it's very easy to get crossed up and the thing will just snap around and bite you. So you have to be really careful. I've been impressed with how easy it is to drive this car carefully and gently. It doesn't really bite. You can certainly feel it break traction if you goose it a little too much, on an on-ramp or something in second gear, you'll feel it break free, but it settles down. You just back off and it straightens right out and it does its thing. And you have to ask for it. if you want to.
Have you been driving it with the black key or the red key?
Red key.
Okay.
So every morning I get in and it starts up in eco mode. So it's only 500 horsepower, which is plenty fine.
I mean, it's insane to think of a car like that, with an eco mode.
And so I switch it to, I played around a little bit. I had set the suspension to track, the transmission I left with street, set the power to 700 and stuff. But it's certainly more easy to commute in when you leave it in eco mode, where you restrict the power to 500 horsepower and the responses to street versus track and stuff. But it's such a capable car in a lot of ways, and it's not just a drag racer. It's definitely it handles very well. But the fact that you can just start up, like I could remote start it with the key fob, and if it were 20 degrees out, it'd start right up and it would idle. It'd be loud, but it would just, and that's what blew my mind about the CTS-V a few years ago too. Is like these are like the most high performance capable cars, and it's a screaming bargain at like $70,000 the way it's equipped for the performance you get. But they're just like so refined, so easy to live with. That was never the case before. The street Hemis back in the day were, they were really powerful, but they were cantankerous.
They would barely idle. If it got too hot, you'd get vapor locked, and if it got too cold, trying to start the thing would be nearly impossible.
Yeah, none of those problems.
And there's nothing like trying to stop a high power car with 4-wheel drum brakes. Yeah,
you get one half good stop, and that's it. I'm going to try it tomorrow. I'll try the commute. I'm getting 16 miles to the gallon, which is dead on to what it says it's supposed to get in mixed driving. So I'm impressed with that, too, when you consider the amount of power it has. I'm going to put in eco mode and see what I can return for fuel economy. I anticipate I'll get between 17 and 18, which is that's astounding in a car like this. So... I like it quite a bit. I think most people who like cars would like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's I fully appreciate the need, for us to be more environmentally sensitive, but there's just something visceral, when you feel that, with a big V8 engine, you feel that vibration. It feels like a heartbeat. It feels like the thing is alive. And it just gets to you. I don't know what it is. The sound and the feel of it. There's nothing like it.
I agree with that. Just like I parked it in the garage this morning at work, and I never really park in the garage, but I parked in there so I could hear it rumble. So I just sat there for like a minute or two before I shut it off. And then when I came out at the end of the day, I put the windows down before I started it so I could hear it echo off It's a car guy's car for sure.
Yeah. And, and it, like I said, it's the complete opposite of the Pacifica Hybrid, which you can drive around that thing, all day long, in complete silence, without ever hearing the engine at all, just the electric drive, not a sound.
Yeah. I need the car that chats with me. I actually shut the radio off and just listened to the engine for half my commute this morning as well.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so clearly I'm enjoying it. I'm completely biased, but if you share the bias, you'll like the Hellcat.
Yep.
All right, let's stay with Chrysler and we'll get to topics. One of the things that popped up is that there are more rumors that the Jeep and the Ram brands could be spun off. If they were to do that, first of all, I don't know how possible that is, but Chrysler has certainly not been shy about trying to shack up with someone. And if they were to sell off Jeep and Ram, that's basically the value center of the company. I don't know what they're left with at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. Marchione a couple of weeks ago, said, he's basically called off the search for a partner. He's given up on trying to get somebody to buy FCA or to merge with them after being spurned by Volkswagen. And GM and everybody else in the world. So, now, he was asked at an event yesterday or the day before by Adam Jonas, a financial analyst, whether he would consider spinning off Jeep and Ram. And he just gave the one-word answer, yes, which to me, on the surface, seems nuts. I mean, certainly those of all the brands within the FCA family, those are certainly the two most profitable by a pretty wide margin, I think. And they generate the bulk of the revenues, especially here in North America. I think Jeep and Ram, account for 80% FCA's revenues in North America.
Yeah, I think they Jeep in particular is also especially popular in China.
Yeah, they sell a lot of Jeeps in China, and they're popular in Europe as well. I mean, it's a globally popular brand, and even the Wrangler, the old school style Jeep, is popular around the world. For obvious reasons. Ram is clearly pretty much a North American exclusive brand for the most part, although they do sell some in the Middle East and some other markets, but it's primarily a North American brand with the pickup trucks. But certainly that's those two brands are FCA's cash cows, and if they were to spin those off as separate companies, it's like what's left. You've got Chrysler, which has the Pacifica and the Challenger, or the 300, Dodge with the Charger and Challenger. Now that they've dropped the Dart, and they still have the Durango, and Alfa Romeo and Maserati, which have puny sales volumes. So it's kind of like if I had to think of a parallel, it would be like Yahoo. They sold off all their core assets to Verizon, all their websites and everything else, and they're left with this little holding company that they're renaming to, I can't even remember what, it just has some investments, their investments in Yahoo Japan and Alibaba and stuff. That's kind of like what would be left of FCA if they did this.
Well, but yes and no, right? I wish he had kept going after that one question, because it makes the speculation sort of unravel. And spinning them off as a standalone company doesn't mean selling them off necessarily. It means
right. It could be like Ferrari, where they still own a significant chunk of the shares. They do an IPO on those two brands, and sell off, part of the shareholding in that, as separate stocks. But still, over time, they're likely to keep selling off more and more of it, I think, or somebody else, some other manufacturer might come in and start buying the shares on the open market and end up, taking over those brands entirely. Yeah. One interesting thing that occurred to me today, though, is if they did do that, so they're left with Chrysler and Dodge here in North America as their two primary brand, core brands that are left. They earlier this week it was announced that Waymo, the Google self-driving car spinoff, was launching their early rider program. Basically they're starting to do a pilot test of their on-demand autonomous mobility service, starting in Phoenix. And they built a fleet of 100 autonomous Chrysler Pacifica hybrids last fall. And they're expanding that. They're getting another 500. They're buying another 500 vans from Chrysler, and they're going to equip them with their self-driving system. What if FCA spins off Jeep and Ram, and basically what you're left with Chrysler is the Pacifica, because the Charger, who knows, or the 300, who knows how many years that's got left in it. So it's basically the Pacifica. And what if that becomes a manufacturing partner for Waymo, and provides them with vehicles? Yeah,
I had almost the same thought. Was okay. He's been shopping the company around for a few years. He's tried to link up with GM and other possibilities. Another small car maker, because that's sort of the hole in their portfolio right now. What if a company, one of those kind of ridiculously capitalized companies, clearly, Waymo or, Uber or some other company just buys Chrysler. Then, and it goes back to what your Navigant leaderboard report suggests too, is that the future favors companies that are more vertically integrated. Part of that is why you guys in doing the research and putting the report together, put GM and Ford on the track to really become the leaders, or are already emerging as the leaders with autonomy, because they make the cars, and making all the other stuff are things they can do as well, versus, a company like Uber or Waymo, where they don't make the cars. They make the stuff that goes in the cars, or some other way. Waymo kind of makes a car, that thing, but it's not. It's not really a car.
The little pod, the Firefly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was never intended to be a production vehicle. That was just a development platform that they went to Roush and had them build those for them. In order to test their hardware and have a dedicated platform that they could use to develop their system.
Yeah. So, like, what if one of these non-automaker mobility providers that has enough money to buy an automaker just buys an automaker?
Certainly a distinct possibility. And I mean, I would not rule it out. Not at all. I mean, it's something that could be done. It's the SCA's what's their market cap? I
think who should buy it is Tesla, because Tesla is going to have a tough time over the next couple of years.
Tesla doesn't have the cash to buy them.
I know. And as the next few years play out, I don't think they're going to ever be in a better cash position than they are now.
FCA's market cap right now is $17 billion. So, I mean, they could certainly do a merger if they wanted to. But the thing is, I don't think that Elon Musk would ever want to do that, because he does not want any part of any company that is building anything but EVs.
Yeah, but so that's stupid. And some of the things that we've seen about Tesla too, like there was coverage about how they're like doing all this revolutionary stuff to bring high tech auto manufacturing to the car world. And you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, you guys aren't.
They're getting all this stuff from a company that is already a supplier to the auto industry and already selling a lot of the same kind of equipment to other car companies.
Right. There was like gee whiz coverage that Tesla is now no longer going to production with soft tooling. They're using more durable tooling, going straight to production. It's like, yeah, like real automakers have been doing that for a long time, guy. It's like, yeah, you're doing it the medieval way.
The only difference in what they're doing, or based on what we've seen, what they appear to be doing, is they skipped the pre-production step, where these days when manufacturers are getting ready to when they're building their integration prototypes, they will bring in the production intent tooling into their prototype facilities. And they'll set up the machines in there and actually use the production intent machines. Those machines will get modified over the course of several months as they're building up their fleet of integration prototypes. And they work out the manufacturing processes, with the machines in a separate facility. And then once they get all that worked out, figure out, okay, what's the sequence that we need to do to assemble these parts to get it all to go together most efficiently. Once they figure that out, then they take those machines and they transfer them into the factory, and then they build more of those machines and flesh out the line. They skipped a step. They just went straight to putting them right in the factory. That's the only difference, and we'll see how that all works out for them in a few months.
Hey, Katie, bar the door.
Yeah,
but I mean, it makes it. If I'm Tesla and I'm having these troubles and I'm trying to ambitiously build a somewhat revolutionary car, but certainly a very advanced car at a very aggressive price, wouldn't it make sense to have, in-house a long experience, so you're not trying to buy that talent either. Like you want to have that experience, and also just the sprawl of facilities that owning a manufacturer would do for you, and the other product lines that would also, make sure that you've got some money to work with if things go a little weird, like, I don't know. Seems like it would be a good move.
Yes. I mean, from a purely business perspective, it makes total sense, but you have to keep in mind that, Musk has no interest in having anything to do with any company that makes ICE engines, internal combustion engines. He doesn't want any part of that. He wants to be pure electric all the way. And
okay, I mean, I can respect that. That's fine.
Yeah, I certainly respect that. It makes it a lot more challenging to get from here to sustainable profitability. But we'll see. But I think the idea of Waymo or Google or Alphabet potentially maybe buying up the core part of Chrysler, the core assets, maybe the Chrysler brand and the Pacifica intellectual property, and maybe even some Fiat stuff. What we could, because part of from the conversations I've had with people at Waymo, what they're looking at for mobility services is a broad range of services, that would encompass a number of different types of vehicles for different applications, so that you're not just going to get, if you're summoning a vehicle, you're not just going to get a van. If you're going somewhere on your own, you could have, smaller vehicles, 1 or 2 person vehicles, when you're going somewhere on your own. So, you could potentially use vehicles like, a Fiat 500, have an electric autonomous Fiat 500 and, various other types of vehicles. So it would not be totally insane for Google. They could certainly afford, to pay $17 billion to buy FCA if they wanted to.
I think that we should just take credit for that rumor and say that we started it and see what happens. No, I mean, it's a very interesting prospect because there's only so many places you can look in the automotive world already. And I feel like Sergio Marchionne's really talked to all of them.
Right.
So far.
Well, and the other thing, is if you did spin off Jeep and you spun off Ram, what's going to be the market cap of what's left of that core company? It's going to be even a lot less than 17 billion. Might be under 10, or as low as 6 or 7 billion, for that core part of the company. And again, that makes it even more attractive for somebody like a Waymo to step in and say, okay, this is going to be our manufacturing base. We're going to buy you and use the plants that produce, these particular vehicles as our manufacturing base for our autonomous vehicles going forward.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, everything that's not Jeep and Ram is the drag on the company right now anyway.
Right. Except the Pacifica. I think the minivans are profitable.
Yeah. And I honestly, I think that, well, maybe not the Dart or the 200, but
they're gone. They're done now. They're stopped. They're no longer in production. So.
But those things had at least the potential to be profitable. I'm sure that they made money off everything that was caliber based, just by dint of how long it was in production. The old Compass and Patriot and stuff, and maybe even the Caliber was profitable before they sunset it, and the Avenger and So the opportunity exists to have those cars be profitable. I don't see anything in their lineup right now that is, and like you said, like the 200 and the Dart are dead, and they're not going to engineer another small car. So at least not from what I've seen.
Yeah, not anything to directly replace compact and mid-size vehicles or compact and mid-size cars. They're looking for partners for that. But in lieu of that, some different kind of deal is certainly a possibility.
That would be fascinating. I'd be really interested to see what happens. We talked about, I think, everybody but Apple.
Yeah. So Apple.
And something happened with them. They got they're trying to actually, and we've actually talked about this possibility too, right? Like Apple not doing their own car, Apple coming in as a supplier. Yeah.
I mean, there's been some. There's been a lot of speculation over the past year, as some people left Apple and others went in and took, Bob Mansfield, a senior VP from their hardware development group that, worked on Mac computers for many, many years, was brought in to take over Project Titan. And there's been all kinds of speculation about what they're doing with that. And last week, they requested and were granted a permit by the California DMV to test autonomous driving capabilities. And, they're, like as Waymo and others have done, when they've, started these kinds of programs, they're using off the shelf vehicles. And in this case, they're using, previous generation Lexus RX 450Hs, just like Google did.
Wonder if they're going to find them as exciting as I did.
Yeah. Well, they're not meant to be exciting, but the reality is, for what they're doing, the Toyota hybrid powertrain is a pretty well-known, well-known system now. There's a lot of people that understand how it works, and a lot of people, from various companies that have worked with these, for their autonomous development. So, they know where to tap into things, to control the various elements of the car, with their systems. And, I got to thinking when they were granted that license last week, there's been some other stories of late. One of the things, with the iPhone and, with some of Apple's other mobile devices, one of the things that's made those devices so good, is they've had great performance and great battery life compared to a lot of other brands, particularly Android systems, because Apple designs their own chips, and they're based on the ARM instruction set, but they design their own custom chips, and they have them fabbed by Samsung and TSMC and other companies sometimes. But they're optimized for their operating system, and they have their own image processing. And a couple of years ago, they bought an Israeli company called PrimeSense that developed the original Microsoft Xbox Kinect sensor. So they've got some interesting sensing technologies there. They've got processing, they've got software. So, and they invested last year $1 billion in a Chinese company called Didi Xuxing, which is the biggest ride-hailing company in China. And Didi, that investment came a few weeks after Uber decided to exit the China market and sold their Chinese assets to Didi as well. So it's interesting that all these things are starting to come together. And what I think Apple is most likely to do now, if they proceed with this, is not to build an Apple car, but to do something very similar to what Delphi is doing, and basically build the whole self-driving stack. So they'll have their own processors that they've designed that are optimized for this application, their software, probably their own sensor systems, just like Waymo has done, and have a services component, because that's something that, Apple CEO Tim Cook has talked a lot about building out, is their services business, so they can offer a turnkey solution to another manufacturer. Like, let's see, who might want something like that? Fiat Chrysler, maybe. If things, go south with Waymo, if Apple has something better to offer than what Waymo has, they could decide to use the Apple system, or, companies like Mazda or, some of the other smaller OEMs could adopt that, or, Apple could decide to buy up, one of the smaller automakers, and use their manufacturing base to put out their own vehicles.
Yeah, it's that component about offering like the full stack, I think, is one of the things that automakers might go after, especially with Apple's reputation for a user experience focus, because that's really hard and it's really expensive, and Apple's very good at it. And so to be able to say, like, we've developed this stuff, it runs on this hardware, and here's how we know how to integrate it into your vehicle. I guess the missing piece for me is that if they're doing all the development on, the Toyota hybrid powertrain, what happens if GM comes knocking and GM wants to integrate it with their hybrid powertrain, which is
they can figure out those problems. I mean, those are not insurmountable. That integration is not insurmountable. I mean, look at Google and FCA. It only took them a few months to do that on the Pacifica. So it's just a matter of once you get the OEM involved, they already know all the connection points. So it wouldn't be that big of a deal, to integrate somebody else's system in there. And there, there's other companies, even some of the bigger companies like, Honda or Toyota might be interested as well.
I would be psyched to have a Honda with some kind of Apple tech interface because boy, I do not like the one that they've got now. I mean, what do you think it looks like? Like what's it going to be like? Is it going to be an entire solution that's really just a part of vehicle and limited to hybrids and EVs, or could we see this like across an automaker's lineup if that's what happens?
Well, I mean, you could certainly put it across a variety of different vehicles, certainly of different types of vehicles, because, one of the appealing things about the whole idea of on-demand autonomous mobility is that you can summon whatever type of vehicle you need at a particular time. I mean, when you buy a car, you buy it for, whatever your worst case scenario is. I mean, if you need to tow a boat a few times a year to the lake, you're going to buy, a truck or a big SUV that can tow that. If you've got a big family, you might buy a big SUV or a minivan. But if you need to go somewhere on your own, you don't need all that space, all the time. So, you can have something that's, real time, right sized for what you need at that moment in time. So if you're just going to a meeting, or going to a doctor's appointment or whatever it might be, then you summon a little car. And if you've got to take the whole family somewhere, you get something bigger. So, having multiple vehicles in the lineup that all use the same hardware and operate on the same mobility platform could work out very well.
So how soon do we think that this is going to arrive?
Well, considering that they're just starting road testing now, and as best we know, they don't have any contracts with any manufacturers. It's going to be, you're talking at least 2022, 23 at this point. If they got a contract with one of the car makers, within the next 12 months, then you've got to do the integration and validation, on a particular vehicle. That's probably going to be a 3 or 4 year process. So I would not expect to see anything before at least 21 or 22, and probably later than that.
That's a little bit of a wait.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not too much, but
it's not that far behind, the rest of the leaders in the business. I mean, it's going to be 2020, 2021 before most of these are out there in some sort of production form anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe in the meantime, certain pieces of it can be used as well. So that it could be almost like a staggered rollout, get people used to, some part of the interface or some part of the, I don't know. Now I'm just going to like product planning strategic mode. So we should move to something else.
So let's see. So we had last week after the show last week, we got an email from a listener from, Paul, and he was asking about, let me read it here. Discussions of autonomous cars focus on the autonomous vehicle avoiding other vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcycles, all good things to avoid. However, people are not the only things on our roadways. Wildlife often crosses roads, like the rabbit that I saw as I was walking the dog earlier today that did not get missed by a human-driven vehicle.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of them around. There's lots of them around here.
That's just bad luck, isn't it?
So some species won't damage cars if hit, such as rabbits, but others will, such as deer or moose. In virtually all cases, the collision is fatal for the wildlife. I presume that all companies working on autonomous cars are programming them to avoid large animals such as deer or moose, but what about programming cars to avoid smaller animals that pose no threat to the car? I can differentiate between a lost bungee cord and a snake crossing the road. I can also differentiate between a turtle and road debris. Will autonomous cars be able to do the same? Are researchers, developers working on this issue, and so on? So basically, First, let me touch on what humans can and cannot recognize. I think the degree to which humans can distinguish some of these things varies wildly, to put it bluntly. And I think depending on the conditions, there's a good chance that most people would not be able to distinguish, especially at nighttime. And depending on the lighting conditions, depending on how light is hitting a branch, or a bungee cord laying on the road versus a snake, and depending on how fast you're going, I think there's a high probability that most humans would not be able to detect the difference.
Well, and some humans would be perfectly okay with running over a snake.
That's true too.
Snake. Which is not okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the reality is, the engineers working on this stuff, a lot of the AI parts of this are focused on image recognition, and being able to distinguish what is it the sensors are seeing in front of me. Is that an animal? Is that a solid object that is going to be harmful if I hit it? Or, is that just an empty cardboard box sitting on the road, which I can run over with impunity? So there is a lot of effort going into trying to distinguish these things. The systems are not going to be perfect, especially early on. There are going to be a lot of mistaken identifications. Just as we do, we make mistakes. But I think what we're going to see is, to the degree that they can recognize what it is, if it's an animal, that's going to be part of the decision-making process, and, that feeds into the path planning algorithms. It's like determining where's the car going to go? Is the car going to change lanes, or is it going to go straight ahead, or is it going to turn? So when the sensors detect something in the road, the first step, try to identify it. If it is a small animal, then it goes into the next part of the algorithm to decide, okay, what am I, I know that the vehicle's going to survive the collision with the small animal, but I'd prefer not to hit it if I can avoid it. Would it be safe for me to change lanes and try to avoid it? Or can I safely stop? So it's going to depend on, is there somebody right behind me? How fast am I going now? What's my closing speed? All of the same kind of factors that we think about, or that most of us think about when we're driving as humans, are going to play into this. So it's like, you're gonna try to make the best decision you can, but there's going to be times when the machine is going to hit the animal and kill it, and there's going to be times when it's going to be able to avoid it. So that's kind of where that is.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge for it, and those are, I think, the nuance that a human brings to the driving experience. You don't think about this stuff, right? Like, nobody wants to hit an animal if you can avoid it. You make that decision. That's an interesting programming challenge, I think, is just to have your software actually have to make that decision at a certain point. Like, nope, it's not safe for me to avoid the animal. I need to hit it. Like, that's, right. That's tough.
We often talk about, programming ethics into these systems. You've got the classic trolley problem of, do you hit a single individual over here, or, hit a busload of people over there?
Bus full of nuns every time.
Well, so, this is, the same kind of problem, obviously on a much smaller scale, and you're not, hopefully you're not talking about, the decision of whether to hit a human or not. But regardless of what it is, whether it's human or an inanimate object, you still have to make the same kinds of judgments, and, there's going to be degrees, whether it's a small animal, large animal, I think ideally you want to try to avoid the collision regardless of what it is. But, it's going to depend on a lot of other factors of what's going on around the vehicle. And, one example of this, last week, GM posted I think this was a third or fourth video that they've posted, from one of the autonomous Chevy Bolts, that they have driving around San Francisco that the team from Cruise Automation is working on. And this one that they recorded during nighttime driving. And I think the whole video is about 15 minutes long. And I didn't watch the whole thing all the way through, but if at some point in the video, there's a scene where the car is driving down the street at night and a raccoon goes wandering across the road. And personally, given my experience with raccoons and my chickens, I would have no compunction about hitting the raccoon. But in this case, the self-driving Bolt did in fact, recognize the raccoon and came to us, or slowed down. I can't remember if it came to a complete stop or not, but it slowed down enough to, it slowed down and the raccoon got out of the way before it got to that point. So it didn't have to come to a complete, actually it was coming up to a stop sign anyway. So, it did manage to avoid the raccoon. But I think, in this particular example, you can see in the video that, it was on a two-way street. And if the raccoon had not gotten out of the way in time, it would not be practical for the autonomous car to swerve to the left to avoid it, because there was oncoming cars coming in the other direction. So, it has to make the same kind of decision that we do on a daily basis.
Yeah. So, and it's good that it was able to avoid it in that situation. When accidents do happen, like the highly publicized Uber crash that happened in Tempe, one of the things that we're seeing now,
you should write something about.
Yeah, I should. I was rather pleased with it because I took a month. It got completely stale, but bad stuff kept happening for Uber, so I was able to just publish it. And it was, I had to change a couple of details, but that's a great company for procrastinating journalists. I just let perfect.
Sorry for the diversion there.
No, that's fine. When it can't avoid crashes and they happen, I don't think it doesn't seem like anybody's really taken into account the role of law enforcement when they come upon one of these. How do you make sure the car is safe for them to even, get people out of? And I know this was an issue with hybrids and electric cars too, especially if there's a bad crash. Is it gonna electrocute people? And then who is at fault? If the car is at fault, how do the data that it's collected, who owns that data? There's a lot of questions that we're going to have to solve to make these more widespread. I didn't even think of it from the law enforcement angle, and I guess nobody else has thought of it either.
Yeah, apparently not. Pete Bigelow at Car and Driver posted an article today about the law enforcement impact of autonomous vehicles, at least in terms of crashes and crash investigation. And as you said, with electrified vehicles, that's one of the factors. The whole idea of how first responders have to deal with these things was worked into the design of these vehicles. So one of the things you'll find if you look into in any hybrid or plug-in hybrid or battery electric vehicle, wherever somewhere where the battery is, you'll find that there's a big orange fuse that you can pull out, which is put there for first responders. And basically that cuts off power from the battery to any of the high voltage systems in the vehicle. So in the event of an accident with any of these kinds of vehicles, the first thing that the first responders will do is go in and pull out that fuse to make sure that there's no juice flowing out of the battery. And that's something we find on all these vehicles. And I think, before we start deploying these vehicles on the road, we need to make some decisions. And whether it's a regulatory mandate or which is something that's probably unlikely to happen in the current political environment, or we establish an SAE standard that and generally with SAE standards, pretty much almost all manufacturers will comply with those because they're usually all participants in developing those standards. So we probably at the very least need to develop some standards for having some sort of kill switch in any kind of self-driving or any sort of automated vehicle, so that in the event of a crash, a firefighter or paramedic or a police officer can reach in there, hit the kill switch and disable any of the automated driving systems, so that they don't have to worry about the vehicle suddenly starting to move off on its own. And then there's also data logging, which, when NHTSA published their autonomous vehicle guidelines last summer, part of what was in there was talking about data logging, recording data, and their focus was more on, the current development phase of these vehicles, wanting manufacturers to record data and keep that so that it can be used, to evaluate, as they move forward, and looked at whether or not we need any regulations, special regulations for these vehicles, so they'd have some data to work from. But I think, going forward, we probably need some established standards, for how much data needs to be recorded and what needs to be recorded as a bare minimum, for investigatory purposes, when we do have crashes involving automated vehicles.
Well, and even just a standard, format for it, so that, the CSV file or whatever from one system can, be interpreted reliably, so that the data fields they all kind of match up. And another sort of area to consider is like, if they're going to put in a kill switch or something, that has to be standardized pretty much across the industry. Like, everybody has to be doing the same thing, so that the first responders don't go, oh yeah, this is a Honda, or this is a Volkswagen, so the procedure is X versus Y. Like, it's got to be, again, it's sort of a standard.
Yeah, it needs to be clear. It needs to be obvious where it is, and it needs to be readily accessible, so that they can get in there and do exactly that. Even on, for example, on Teslas, they have a switch. It's actually, I think, underneath the front bumper, where you can reach under there, pull that out to kill power from the battery.
Don't do that to some random guy's Tesla, though. That's not very nice. Although you could probably have a lot of fun with that.
Just don't do it to somebody that you don't know.
Yeah.
And we are not condoning that sort of behavior.
No, maybe.
Right?
Absolutely not. No.
Right.
If you engage in shenanigans, you deserve what you get. That's all I'll say.
Remember the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated.
All right. My wife's grandfather used to say, "Put yourself in danger, and you shall perish." I think that those are good rules to live by. So yeah, it's just, once again, as technology evolves, we have to think about all these things, and it seems like California is kind of a leader in pushing some of this thought. They're thinking about, or maybe they have already mandated law enforcement interaction plans. It sounds like they're thinking about it still, and it's going to be part of regulation.
For electric vehicles, one of the things that manufacturers have done, is they publish guides for first responders, safety guides, with information for each vehicle, where to find the shutoff fuses and things like that. And, I know back in 2010, 2011, when GM launched the Volt, the original Volt, they did, they went around the country and did training sessions for first responders all around the country, and they had, Volts that they took out there, including some crashed Volts. And, so they used that to train first responders on, based on I know they do this with other vehicles as well, from time to time, so they can know, especially with newer vehicles that have a lot of high strength steel, showing them, if you need to cut through an A-pillar, here's the best place to do it. Here's where to use the jaws of life, where you're going to be able to get through the material, that sort of thing. And here's how to handle the batteries safely, so that nobody gets electrocuted. So, they're going to have to do a lot of the same kinds of things with automated vehicles going forward as well.
Yeah. It's amazing how many things you have to, like how many little pieces of our everyday life you have to just reconsider and re-engineer to make this stuff a reality.
And that's why we can't rush this stuff to market too quickly. I mean, we have to think about how we're going to handle these kinds of situations, because you're going to find all kinds of different scenarios that need to be addressed. And, so you got to come up with some solutions for those, hopefully before you encounter them.
What, you don't think we're going to have like self-driving flying cars by 2020? That's what they're saying.
No. No.
All right. Well, let's wrap up. The last thing you did when you were in New York was you had an interview with Elena Ford.
Hold on. Before we get to that,
pardon.
We did have one other tweet that came in today from Aaron asking about researching availability of CarPlay, and lots of manufacturers just adding in 2017 models. And he asked about stats on user adoption. We don't have any stats on that, but certainly, going into 2017 and especially into 2018, their CarPlay and Android Auto support is becoming more and more common. And it's going to be a lot tougher to find cars, in the next year or so that don't have it than it is to find cars that do have that capability.
So buy a new car.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like aftermarket units are going to, at a certain point,
there are some aftermarket units out there. They're mostly still fairly pricey, but they are available, usually in, doubled in head units, with touchscreens, but you can check them out.
It reminds me.
Did you put that head unit in your Crown Vic yet?
I started, the car is, I have an old house and it's I try not to do anything on it because it's like Pandora's box, and the car is 100 years newer and it's the same damn thing. It's, I got the Metra wiring loom adapter kit and I put it all together, and, everything works. I took the old radio out. I had to fab up a Ford radio removal tool because it's been so many years. I used to actually have the real tools that go in. There's 4 holes and you just put them in, you pull on them and pop the radio out. I must have disposed of mine from years ago, so we just went to Home Depot and got some rod and I just cut it and bent it and whatever. But yes, that works. And then to actually mount it in the Crown Vic, so the 98 to 2003 Crown Vics, the radio is doubled in the front, and then it narrows down to a single din in the rear, and there's a duct for the defroster, and that's why it does that, so it can clear. So it's really like a half din. So a full double din does not fit. It bangs into that duct.
Oh man, that sucks.
2003 and later has a different duct. I have the part number. So cool. I can order either a new one if it's still available. It's $100, or I can get a used one, which is my plan because I don't want to spend $100 on a duct. To get this duct out, this is like the piece they built the car around. The whole dash has to come out, and it's like it sounds bad, but it's not, and it's a bit of a big job.
I mean, if you think about it, a duct is not something you typically have to replace very often. So, right. It's something that you put in when you build the car, and then you never think about it again. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people don't think about the way the car is built, right? So they'll go in and they'll hack and
including some of the engineers. Right.
Well, there's that. This is it's not Ford's fault. This is just a problem of my own doing. The entire dashboard is put into the car as an assembly. So you can also remove it as an assembly, and it's a limited number of connections. There's physical connections, and there's maybe 8 or 10 bolts and nuts and stuff you got to remove. Some wiring connectors, and then you can lift the dashboard up and sort of plop it forward. I think I probably have to undo one of the steering U-joints as well, so that the column can separate. It sounds like a big deal, and it's kind of a pain, but it's really not that big of a deal. And then you can get at the duct from the back. I can take a bunch of other pieces out and get the duct and put the new one in. So that's where we stand. The radio functions, and so I was impressed with what you can get for aftermarket for not a whole lot of money, and I'm psyched to have Bluetooth in the car once I actually put it back together. So
cool.
There's that. And the next thing I'm going to do is figure out suspension tuning, because I hate the way it rides. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I need to get some cop car suspension bits.
I thought about that.
Or Marauder pieces.
Yeah. The main thing is the shocks, and cop car shocks aren't as good as the Marauder shocks. The Marauder shocks are no longer available, and the technology was sold off. I think it was, I forget who it was sold from. They were like Edelbrock at one point, and maybe they were sold to Edelbrock. I forget. But I don't think you can get them anymore. So I don't know. Figure it out. I kind of want to like weigh all the corners and figure out the spring rates and custom valve the shocks. And I'm like, no, that's a whole bunch of money. I'll buy something that's better.
It's a whole lot of effort for a Crown Vic.
But I would learn so much. It would be somewhat interesting. I'd still at the end of the day be left with a Crown Vic.
Emphasis on somewhat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't like full frame vehicles. I like unibody vehicles because they are more rigid and they resist, bending and twisting. This car does a lot of bending and twisting. I don't care what people say that it's a solid car. No,
that's nonsense.
The frame is strong, but that's where like the body that they bolt on the frame is flimsy. I don't want to get hit from the side in this car. I'll die. So we could do a whole episode of me bitching about the Crown Vic. Thanks, Grandma, for the inheritance. Anyway, yeah. So you speaking of Ford, you spoke to Elena Ford.
Yes. While I was in New York for the auto show, I had the opportunity to go down and visit the Ford Hub. If you've been to Lower Manhattan in the last year or so, I guess probably about the last 6 months or so, you may have noticed that they finally opened up the new transit hub at the World Trade Center. And it's a place called the Oculus with this massive white sort of shellfish looking kind of roof over it. It's actually really cool looking. But below that, in addition to having the stations where all the subways and trains come in there, where people can transit, to go to their jobs in the World Trade Center. There's also a giant shopping mall down there, an underground shopping mall.
Well, of course there is.
Of course there is. And in one of the storefronts, Ford has set up something called the Ford Hub. And it's an interesting sort of brand building exercise. And what it's intended to do, I mean, if you think about it, most of the people that are walking through that mall are, people that obviously aren't driving. A lot of them are either commuters, going back and forth between the city and out to New Jersey or up north to Connecticut or somewhere else. Or they're heading out to, or in a lot of cases they're tourists, just checking out the place, and they could be from anywhere. And so what they've done is they've put a bunch of interesting little exhibits in this place that are related to some of Ford's mobility efforts. So there's no actual car on display in here, so it's not like a retail car storefront. But they've got guides that will take you through, and you can. There's a VR experience where you can, put on an Oculus Rift headset and experience, putting together a Mustang and driving that around, and some cool stuff in there. And so I had a chance to sit down with Elena Ford, who is a member of the family, and she is the vice president of consumer experience at Ford. So she works in Ford marketing. and we chatted for about 20 minutes. Also, Rebecca Lindland from KBB was also there. She's another very respected analyst, and the three of us had a really interesting chat about what Ford was doing in the Ford Hub. So we'll go right into that, and then that'll be the end of the show, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
Okay, so her first question was, why do we do this?
How did this happen?
How did this happen? Or what's the idea, right? So last year we launched an app called Ford Pass, which is basically our digital connection, connecting the online and offline with customers to deliver a best-in-class consumer experience. So we wanted to connect with customers. And that's our digital play and a piece of the digital puzzle that we have. Within that is our personal connection to customers, which is a guide. You can push a button, you can chat with somebody, you can talk to them. Any of the features or functionality in the app, you can actually talk to someone about it. You don't have to get a recording or try to find how it works. And then we wanted to showcase our mobility solutions in a physical location. And that's how we landed on the Ford Hub. So it's like a three-legged stool: digital, physical, personal. And Westfield World Trade Center, we chose this location because they were opening, and when they were still under construction, we met the Westfield team, and they offered us this location. And if you don't know, you probably know this, Rebecca, the World Trade Center is the transportation hub of the world. There's 300,000 people per day that come through here. So it's an opportunity for us to start a dialogue with people who are commuters as well as people who are tourists who come by here every single day and who may or may not be familiar with Ford and may see us as an automobile company but would never think of us as a mobility company. And so it's an opportunity for us to show them an experience and take them through all the things that we have here in this studio. So we opened about 60 days ago. We thought we'd have about 200 people per day coming through. We have 600 people per day coming through.
Holy cow. How many are commuters and how many are tourists? And that was in January and February?
January 31st we opened.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and so it's about 50-50.
Wow.
Yeah, so we thought that it would be more tourists.
Right.
Because we thought the commuters, why would they bother, right? I mean, they're just on a path, right? You're just going to your destination. But they're really interested, and I think it's the people that, kind of come by here all the time, and then they go, ooh, what's that? Yeah. So we're really excited to have both, because when you go to the map, you can see your trains or your buses, and we're trying to cater really to give them information about what's relevant to them. And then if you're a tourist, we give you information how do you get from here to Carnegie Hall? How do you get from here, baseball, Yankee Stadium?
Right.
How do you get to Yankee? Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
So we were very thoughtful of the things that we put into the map and what people would be interested in for both the commuters and the tourists. And as you go through the studio, you'll see that you can download the Ford Pass app. If you want to learn about a Ford vehicle, we have a configurator. So we love the cars and trucks that we build and service. And if you want to learn about it, if you want to talk to a dealer, we can connect you. So we're not.
The idea to kind of showcase Ford and what you're doing, what your larger strategy is within part of this larger multimodal mobility ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, we want people to come in here. We want to educate them. We want to collaborate with them, and we want to entertain them. And we want them to see that Ford is a company that wants to deliver a great consumer experience and showcase to them the mobility solutions that we're thinking about. And frankly, we want feedback from them. This is something that they're interested in. So this is something they're not interested in. We've built a 25-foot mobility wall, built on the City of Tomorrow that we talked about in Detroit, that gives them information that it's over there. We'll show it to you. You get this beep to keep. You get this hub card when you come in, and then you can take. Each station you can take it with you. So this is another thing is when people leave here, they still have their experience with them. And this is something that's really important to us, that they can go on fordpass.com/hubs, and they can retrieve, what was the location I went to again? Oh, it was Madison Square Garden. Here's how I get there. Or I did a self-driving selfie. What did it look like? Oh, I can go get it on here. Or whatever it is that they did here, they still have it with them. And so this is about building a relationship with customers and keeping that two-way dialogue going with them.
Right. So when they register, what kind of information do they give you?
You can just do the beep to keep. I mean, you just beep it when you go over. We'll show you. You just put it on the station, and they don't need to give us any information. But they give us their name, address, and zip code, basically. Okay. I mean, when they go on the website after they give us their name and address, so it goes right into our regular database that we have for customers.
Okay, and then can they opt in?
Yeah. But we right now are not. We haven't been open for 2 months. We aren't, actively sending them anything right now.
No.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to give them a break. But we've had 14,000 people go on and get their souvenirs. Thank you.
That's amazing.
There's so much in my head. I'm trying to make sure I tell you everything.
Would the goal longer term be to start generating leads for your dealer network, connecting the people who've signed in through programs like this?
If they express interest for a vehicle, we can connect them to dealers in their zip code. We have the lead generation tool. The guys all have the lead generation tool that we use in general in any experience that you go to with Ford. So we're completely synced up with that. So everything here is synced up to everything we do at Ford normally.
Right.
So.
What about? I guess are you also talking to the people that come through here and find out? Obviously you're getting zip codes, so generally the geographic area where they're coming from. Are you talking to them about what sorts of services would be of interest to them? Which are the things they see here, or things that they don't see here that they might be interested in?
Yeah, so what the guides are doing basically is they're walking them through. The guides are all culturally trained to know whether or not people actually want to talk or not talk, whether they want a tour, whether or not when people go up to something and they can't make it work, people come over and help. So they're extremely well trained, and the manager of the hub is very conscious of where people are in the store and what's going on, so that there's nobody's left stranded, because that's a big thing that we're very conscious of. And so what people do is the most popular thing is the last mile, where they learn about mobility and the mobility challenge, and you can learn about how much energy you save and time by using mobility and vehicles and bikes. The second most popular is the VR experience in the rear of the store, where you can do this Mustang over Manhattan. You can go and you can put the VR on, and you can put the pieces of the Mustang together, and then at the end they take a picture of you and you can go and retrieve it. So, and then the third most popular is all the Ford diecast cars. We have 5,000 diecast cars, and that's really for social sharing. People come in here and they want to tell people they've been here. And that's one of the things we were like,
what's the biggest surprise?
Yeah, surprise. I mean, we were sort of hopeful they would do that, but the amount of selfies and people going on and sharing that they've been here, and so we're really excited about that. And so because we don't have a car in the middle, as you can tell, right? We really wanted to do something with cars. So one of the designers well, how about 5,000 diecast cars? I'm like, okay, cool. So it's fun to have people come and they try to find their favorite car. Right now, the Mustang and the GT are the most popular, as you would imagine.
Right.
And we had these girls the other day, and we'll take you through it. But like they took all the pink cars off and put them in like a little like row, and we're like, you know, like. And the moms were like watching it. We're like, seriously? So, you know, so I think, you know, and then we are gaining feedback. But honestly, most people are just sort of like curious. They come in and they're kind of like, you know. So all the feedback has been positive. We haven't had anybody saying like anything negative. They're just more curious as
like
to
what is Ford doing in a place like this,
right?
And what I mean,
and what is
the cars. I mean, what's
right? And so I think, and so they're learning, and so they're coming in, and like I said, we've only been open for 2 months. We're getting positive feedback, and people are learning what Ford's doing. You know, and we're excited because we're telling our mobility story, and you know, we're generating good buzz about Ford in a positive way.
Have you had Wall Street analysts come down?
Have we had? I don't think we've had any Wall Street analysts come in.
I don't think so.
No. Our first slot of media that we did with Mark when we opened was just primarily there was
consumer tech.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that I've been asked a lot this week is with the valuation, you know, of Tesla overtaking
That conversation.
and how they're seen as a tech company. They're not seen as a mobility. You know, they're not seen as a manufacturer. They're classified that way, but that's not how.
But that's not the perception.
I was going to say it's the perception.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all the perception.
And I think that's exactly why, you know, companies like Ford and GM and other automakers have been spending so much time at CES over the last decade, is because you're reaching out to a different audience. You're trying to help generate that perception of being more than just a manufacturer of stuff.
Right. Like a great manufacturer.
And I think the important part is, you know, I think our job is to deliver a great consumer experience. And I think part of being here is gaining, like we were saying, gaining consumer feedback. And they are giving us feedback. They're, you know, the amount of time they spend in each area, that's telling us what they like and what they don't like. I mean, you know, like we have this New York Mobility Challenge. Like that will switch out at the end of May because the Mobility Challenge is over. We have the World of Tomorrow, and you know, we can gain feedback from customers like, do you like this? Do you not like this? Are you interested? And so to me, it's like about us telling our story. You know, it's interesting what other people are doing, but to me, it's like Ford is a company who's been around for 114 years building vehicles, and we love our vehicles, and we also, our job is to make people move.
Right.
And that's what we're doing here. We're making people move in a completely different way, and we're showing them how they can learn the things we're doing.
Right. And, you know, speaking of, you know, consumer experience, the nature of what a consumer experience is with transportation and mobility is changing.
Completely.
You know, it's inherently, it's being driven both by technology, but also societal changes. You know, we have to change the nature of mobility and thus the experience. I mean, it's going to change from buying individual cars to...
And just think about how people move in New York City. People take the train, take the bus. They drive their car. If you live in Greenwich, you drive your car to the station, and then you take the train. And then when you get off the train, you probably take an Uber or a cab or another train.
Absolutely.
So it's a multimodal journey, and Ford is part of that conversation. And so part of being in New York is I grew up here, so I know New York like the back of my hand, and you know, it's about generating a great customer experience and allowing customers to tell us, you know, here's how we feel and this is what we think. And, you know, building and servicing great cars is great, but we also need to help people move in a more efficient way.
Even going back to Rebecca, your comment about the perception, right? So getting people to think of Ford differently isn't going to happen overnight. I mean, for 114 years, we've been known for building, you know, cars, trucks, SUVs, you name it. But we've got to start somewhere, and this is the way to start that. That way to start that conversation. And even going back to the Super Bowl ad.
Right.
You know, because you don't have all of these services out there right now. You know, there's not that marketing muscle that's behind everything like there is traditional vehicles. But the Super Bowl ad was the first time that we had really communicated what we were doing in this space to a mass audience.
Right.
You know, when we showed Chariot and the bikes and the AV in there, and then you have something like this. It's a lot. What we were talking about earlier. It's educational. It's a lot of education.
It's interesting you bring that up, and I actually have something bag I can show you because on Auto Trader and KBB we track the impact of Super Bowl ads, and so I can show you where there still is because I noticed that Ford didn't have significant changes in their traffic to our site, whereas other manufacturers it was off the chart.
Right.
And so there's still that need to connect those two stories, you know, so that people then say, hey, you know what, let me see what Ford is doing in both of those spaces and be able to weave that together so that they see that, you know, that the Ford that they drive to the train station connects to the Ford that then is maybe at the other end, or that mentality.
Absolutely.
Right? That, you know, maybe then you get a Chariot once you get into the city.
Exactly.
And that weaving that story together.
And we're just at the beginning of the Chariot story, right? You know,
We're just
a really good example.
Even the whole story around automated vehicles, you know, that's about far more than just the core technology.
Absolutely.
Right, it's about the experiences.
It's all the services around that.
Exactly.
How you use those vehicles, access those vehicles, and different places and different applications. In some places, you're going to have transit type vehicles, and other places it's going to be little pods.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's global too. I mean, that's the thing. Every city globally has a different need and different opportunities.
Yes.
And
that is an incredible opportunity.
And the experiments that Ford's been doing around mobility for many years now. I mean, this is not something in the last 12 months.
Right.
You know, there's been all kinds of projects in India and Africa and elsewhere.
Exactly.
You know, with mobility for healthcare providers.
Exactly.
The Riders for Health and
all that stuff.
It's just
So there's all kinds of different things that have been happening, and they're all part of this larger system of how you move people and things around the world.
You see, like, not to interrupt you guys, but like that lady just came in with her son, and like they just we give them like a little bag with like a toy, like a car in it, and like something like a little gift bag. And we don't give that to everybody, but like it's like a little kid, so you give it just to like keep, and then they go home and they have a bag with Ford on it.
Right.
So I said when we have people come in and like we can't do like every single person, but like so now they go home and they have that bag and it's got Ford on it and they're gonna remember it.
And they're going to walk around the city.
And they're gonna walk around with the bag.
Right.
And it's interesting that earlier you talked about training the guides around here, the cultural training. And that's an interesting approach. Trying to find that balance between you obviously want to create a new perception of what Ford is and what Ford does, without beating people over the head.
Right.
You don't want to be overbearing and trying to sell stuff.
Right.
So
But
how many languages do people speak here? I'm sorry. Let me ask you another question. How many people are here and how many languages do they speak while you chew?
They English and Spanish.
Oh, okay. Is there an effort to do more? Yeah, because I would think Arabic and Chinese.
I think that they could do that, but we haven't had a big. I think some of them could. I think one or two of them could speak another language, but we've had mostly English and Spanish. Spanish was required, right?
Right.
But it depends. Like we have to see. Like literally, we've been open for 2 months.
Right.
At the 6-month mark, then I'll start making other decisions of the things that we need to sort of evolve. We're also looking at. We have like a quarterly calendar of how we're going to update things. What things are we going to enhance?
Sure.
So it's evolving because as we get feedback, we can say, oh well, this might be something we need to change or we need to think about. So it's not like going to be static and just sit here, because it's a studio. It needs it's got momentum, and so we need to keep the momentum going.
And is it the only one like this?
This is the only one right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at San Francisco as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because as Angie mentioned, we have the Chariots
right
in San Francisco, and we're about to in Ford Pass launched Motivate and Bikes in San Francisco.
Okay.
So with Ford Pass, just so you guys know, is our one-stop shop app, and we launch updates every 30 days. And so we just launched the fuel points of interest in the U.S. and now launch in Europe and China. And Mark was just in China, and he launched Ford Pass to all of China this past weekend.
Yep.
So we're really excited about, that was sort of the media consumer launch. We launched to employees and dealers about 4 months ago in China. So we've launched in 8 months, 6 countries in both Ford and Lincoln in this, connected ecosystem of Ford Pass. And so we're going to keep launching. We got Motivate the Bikes coming in. So San Francisco is a really important city for us.
Right.
So we're considering a hub there. We just got to find the right location.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to try out Ford Pass when it launched last year, and I even used it to call up and talk to a guide and just ask some questions about what sort of response they were getting. And I think it's an interesting platform. I'm curious, and part of it is also tying in third-party services like parking.
Right.
What kind of response are you seeing from providers of third-party services that you can tie into that? Is there a lot of interest?
We have more people wanting to come into the app than we can launch every 30 days. So we have more demand than we can contain. Okay. I guess more ideas too than we can contain. So we just launched, as I said, we just launched Fuel. So if you drive, about 80% of the people are owners. So right now we're going to cater to our owners. And so I think it's important, parking is going well. Fuel, as I said, just launched, so you go in, if your car is low on fuel, it'll tell you that, you're low on fuel, and here's the closest gas stations. And the gas is working really well. People are really using that.
Yeah. Charging stations?
Charging stations, not yet.
Okay.
No.
That's still on the old platform, though.
Charging stations is on My Ford Mobile, yeah. But My Ford Mobile isn't connected into Ford Pass yet. So we haven't connected the two. Anyways, it's a long technical discussion. It would take probably the whole day.
You don't have to bore us.
Yeah. But eventually, maybe. We have a big demand for companies that want to integrate with us, but right now we're focused on parking, fuel. We have Ford Pay, so we're using those right now and building those out. And in Europe, in Germany, we built into a platform called Flingster, which does car sharing in Germany. So we launched Flingster. It's a car sharing platform that existed in Germany, and we built into it. So if you're in Germany, you can car share off of their platform for our Ford customers. So it's good. That's working well. And then in China, in the next 60 days, since we just launched, we'll announce at the Shanghai show that we'll do pickup and delivery. So through eDija. So
that would be popular in Manhattan.
Yeah. It'd be popular in Manhattan, but it'll be super popular in China first. And Lincoln's going to announce pickup and delivery actually, I think tomorrow. So we're, we have a.
You'll likely hear about that during your Lincoln briefing.
Yeah.
So keep that to yourself tomorrow, please.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where if I have a backlog of things people want to do, and so because we're global and because we're, everybody is interested, and so we're really excited about. We have about 600,000 members in the U.S. In Ford Pass, yeah. So it's one of those things where we got to be careful because we are trying to be thoughtful there as well, and not just put anybody in or not just integrate with any API.
Yeah, I mean, you want it to be trustworthy partners
and relevant
that aren't going to misuse the data that's shared.
And you know what also is very popular is perks. tour.
Yeah.
Thanks.
How cute. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
it's like when was the last time a Ford Sherman was this crazy busy? You know what I mean?
Like I was saying,
And,
I
you know,
haven't
one
been
thing is-
here while it's been open, so I'm interested to see just kind of like people come
Absolutely,
in.
right?
Yeah. So anyway, we'd love to stay around.
We have someone that can show you guys around and take your hub card so that you can go back and see kind of what, because it's kind of fun.
Right.
And that way you get to kind of experience it.
It's really exciting for you, I bet.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.